Welcome to the Wired to Hunt podcast. This week on the show, Tony Peterson and I are breaking down our 2024 rut hunting plans and sharing 39 specific actionable tactics for the whitetail rut.
Welcome to the Wired to Hunt podcast, your guide to the whitetail woods. Presented by First Light, creating proven, versatile hunting apparel for the stand, saddle, or blind. First Light. Go farther, stay longer. And now, your host, Mark Kenyon.
Hey guys, real quick here, before we get to the show, it is that most wonderful time of the year. The whitetail rut is about to kick off, and as you might know from past years, we like to celebrate the month of November with a few special deer hunting tunes. 2 years ago, we came out with our first Whitetail Rut parody song of sorts, I guess you could call it. We called that The Most Wonderful Time to Kill Deer. Riff on a Christmas tune, of course. And then last year we had a second one. That one's called Big Whitetails, going along with the tune of Jingle Bells. So we are going to bring those back for you to listen to this month on each episode of the podcast here. So real quick, we're going to play you our two rut hunting theme songs of the year. Enjoy them, and then we will get to our big ol' rut hunting extravaganza podcast shortly. Enjoy.
Boys, good to see you. Hayden, it's been a while. Hey, sorry I'm late. I crashed my Pontiac Aztek into a light pole and had to walk the rest of the way, but I'm here now. That's what matters. Can you give me a glass of scotch, please, Hayden? Just 2 rocks in there. I don't like ice. We're starting already. Is this happening? Okay, just give me the glass. Thank you. Okay, here we go. It's the most wonderful time to kill deer. With the rut now just starting and dashing and darting and lanes cut and cleared. It's the most wonderful time to kill deer. There's far too much ice in this glass. It's the happiest season of all. There's got to be at least 12 cues. With grunting and bleeding and cold fronts and sleeting the last weeks of fall. It's the happiest season of all. There'll be pictures for posting and bragging and boasting and truck beds with big bucks in tow. There'll be narrow missed stories and tales of near glories of booner bucks missed with our bows. It's the most wonderful time to kill deer. Not just one, maybe 2. There'll be no does of blowing and luminox glowing and blood trails so clear. It's the most wonderful time to kill deer. Hey, excuse me, can I have a napkin, please? I just spilled some scotch on my loafers. I can't have dirty loafers in the studio. Yeah, thank you. Tailgate beers for drinking and big bucks a slinking and chasing and scent checking does. There'll be fighting and scraping and no more escaping and arrows shot true hitting home. Key change? What? No one told me. It's the most wonderful time to kill deer. I was very unprepared for this. There'll be much morning sitting and cold fronts hitting the dawn crisp and clear. It's the most wonderful time. Oh, the most wonderful time. Yes, the most wonderful time to kill deer. There's too much ice in the glass. 2 rocks! It's that time of the year again. I'm back. Marcus Kenyon, how are you son of a gadwall? You look terrible. I'm just kidding, or am I? I'm sorry I'm late. I crashed my recumbent bicycle into the side of a Quiznos, and I know what you're thinking. I am as sober as a newborn blue crab. I swear to you, this is just kombucha. I'm watching the gut health. You gotta do it as you get older. Also, I'm wearing this ankle bracelet that makes a beep beep sound if I have a drop of the stuff. Also alerts the authorities, who in turn alert my parole officer, so there'll be none of that in the studio today. I promise you. Let's get go. Oh, You're queuing it up already. Okay, thought we'd learned a lesson this year, but I guess not. Here we go.
I love those B.I.G. big whitetails. Those stinky rotten B.I.G. big whitetails. I love those B.I.G. big W-H-I-T-E tails. I love those B.I.G. big whitetails.
Big whitetails, big whitetails, big whitetails are great. Oh, what fun it is to sit in a freezing cold tree all day. Big whitetails, big whitetails, big whitetails are great. Oh, what fun it is to sit in a freezing cold tree all day. Dashing through the woods, for the morning light turns gray. Across the fields and draws, creeping all the way. Shh, 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 I climb into the tree. Big bucks are on the way. What fun it is to sit and wait for a gosh darn deer all day. Oh, big... I'm sorry, what is this? Pizzicato strings? Who do you think I am, Enya? Get this out of here. I don't want to hear it. Thank you. Big whitetails, big whitetails, big whitetails are great. Oh, what fun it is to sit in a freezing cold tree all day. My hopes and dreams are high. The rut is finally here. Mark said it's the most wonderful time to kill a white-tailed deer. Pinch points and bedding's where you'll find me hanging 20 feet in a tree. Grunt tubes my bow and Spectre camo, this really can't be beat. A day or two ago, I thought that this was fun. But now I'm frozen to my seat and the good times, they are gone. I've ate up all my snacks. My hands and toes are numb. And when I climbed down from my stand, that son of a buck decided to come.
I love those B.I.G. big whitetails. Those stinky rotten B.I.G. big whitetails.
I love those B.I.G. big W-H-I-T-E tails. I love those big white tails all day. I don't know why this is happening. I swear to God. Oh, officer, what seems to be the problem here? Oh, this? I don't know why this is happening. It must be a malfunction. You know, sometimes this happens when the batteries run low. You don't need to smell that. That's just kombucha. Okay, yes, you've got me. It's Everclear and Pacific Cooler Capri Sun. I am so sorry. I don't know why my life has brought me here. Marcus, I'm so sorry. Enjoy the rut or whatever. Good luck.
Welcome to the Wired to Hunt podcast, brought to you by First Light and their new whitetail line and their Camo for Conservation initiative. All great stuff that we are excited about, but we are also very excited because today is our 2024 Whitetail Rut extravaganza galore Big Buck Fest podcast with me and Tony Peterson. And as I just teased in the intro, we've got 39 very specific, actionable, mind-blowing, revolutionary whitetail rut hunting strategies that we're going to share with you today. So I hope you're ready for that. Tony, are you ready for that?
I am, and I misunderstood the assignment because I have 39 of my own. Like 100% guarantee dead mature buck during the rut. 30.
Perfect. Well, then we came to the right place and the right person because, in all seriousness, everyone at this time of year wants at least one more good idea, right? I think people will be listening to this podcast as they're heading to their hunting camp or to public land or to their back 40 or whatever it is for the thing. Like, this is that time of year we've all been dreaming of. We've all been waiting for. When this podcast airs, let me confirm the date. When this podcast airs, it will be Halloween, October 31st. I mean, that's the kickoff, right?
Yeah, and there's a cold front coming through then, through much of the...
it could be really good. So yeah, man, I jokingly said 39, but I do have an idea for something I want to do at the end here. My idea here, well, I'll wait. I guess I'll wait till we get to that point. But I do want to share some real actionable ideas. But before that, I did think it would be useful to kind of lay out our own plans, what we've been doing, what we're planning on doing over the next couple weeks. We haven't had a big touch base since before the season. So I do know you just got back from a hunt and you're about to leave for another hunt. So can you give us like the quick rundown of North Dakota? And if there was anything from that, I know that was like a mid-October hunt, but is there anything coming out of that you're going to be keeping in mind as you lead into the rut stuff?
Dude, that was maybe the most enjoyable hunt I've ever filmed. I missed a giant and had to let him go a different time because camera guy couldn't get on him because of the way we were set up. So I missed a legit 158 pointer that I snort wheezed in, who put on it. It's probably the best big buck encounter I've ever filmed.
Wow.
Total, like, so freaking rad. And then caught up to that buck 2 miles away, and a couple days later had him raking a tree in front of me at 21 yards, perfect opening to his lungs. And just the way we were in separate trees, and there was one cedar tree between us. And so I'm looking at it, I'm like, this is a dead buck. And the camera guy's like, I don't have him, but the way he's going to leave there, I'm like, the odds are pretty high he's going to give me a shot. And he just took a route where I couldn't find an opening. And so, but I'll tell you what, I don't know what's happening to me, but I've never been more okay screwing up on a giant and just letting one walk. And I ended up finding a little success later, but it was like, just the whole hunt was so fun and you just felt like you were in it. And I'll tell you what, so I got out there on, I think October 13th, I saw a really good buck chase hard on October 14th. I saw another really cool 6-pointer that was like out to his ears. He just didn't have much for tines. I saw him chase. So in that week, I already was seeing like big deer kind of just bumping and doing their thing. And I've only been a little bit because I've only been home just a little bit, but I had the other morning here where I had a 2-year-old 7-pointer come in and he ran does in this little patch of woods I was in for like 2.5 hours. And it was just like, it has me so excited. Like if you're listening to this, you're like, oh, it's not kicking in yet or whatever. I'm like, you and I have talked about this last week of October, those first couple days in November, man, everybody wants that like 7th through the 12th or whatever, but this time of year it can just be freaking bonkers.
Yeah. I love it. I do think you have a little bit of that. I mean, I know that, 6, 7, 8, 9, that's when a lot of does are ready to go. And so there's a lot of bucks going after them, but you also have bucks getting locked down at that time period too, right? You're starting to get that happening. But right now, October 31st, November 1, 2, you're just getting a few does in, but all the bucks are ready to go. So like you've got all the bucks on their feet and nobody's locked down or hardly anyone's locked down. They're all searching. It's just, it can be great. I agree with you. I absolutely love it. Now I got to ask you a question though about your North Dakota thing. Legitimately, you found that buck 2 miles away within just a few days.
So,
and I know this is a river you're hunting, so I know they travel up and down that, but you must have been shocked when all of a sudden you're seeing the same buck so far away.
Dude, it was wild. I mean, in fact, when I glassed him and filmed him through my spotter, the first night I got there, and he was with 2 other bucks that were like 120s type, like good deer. And he was 600 yards into private when I saw him. And where I ran into him, I found this little crossing on this just like patch of brush in this meadow, and they were just using it. So I had seen that buck or one of those 3 go through there quick. I just got a glimpse of him through my spotter, and then I picked him up down river. And so anyway, went in there, called him in the first morning I had to hunt there, screwed it up. He's gone, shot hair off his back, like time to recoup. And I ended up hunting my way the other direction downriver to this area that has just some really good bedding cover, you know, like kind of that cedar, scrub oak, you know, river bottom flat type stuff. And what happened to me, and this is like a good lesson for anyone who's not hunting like high deer densities, is I had places where they were just like, they were covering a lot of ground. I mean, we would watch these deer start in one spot, and by the time you couldn't see them anymore, they were like a mile away. You know, those Western deer cover ground. And so I was kind of playing that game at the beginning, and then I walked into this spot that has this little cattle guzzler in it that I know about, and it was getting hot. And I jumped like a 150, and a 2-year-old bedded right by it. And then
different 150.
Yeah. And then and then a couple more. I actually jumped 5 deer walking in there. And so I'm like, okay, I'm on a concentration here in this little, you know, like this is a little zone. And that's where that buck went to after he encountered me. So he traveled upriver. He knew about those little patches of cover, obviously. And he was holed up in there, and there were mule deer holed up in there. And I was measuring them on OnX, you know, where you can do like the area shape thing. And they're like 5 acres, 8 acres. And so it's like not much. Like you look at it and you're like, it's just the best stuff they had. And there ended up being so many deer in there because I don't know if it was my pressure on the river bottom or it was just like the weather, because it got, you know, the weather changed a lot on us, but it was a good lesson because I was playing that travel game and then that died on me. And as soon as I moved to where it was like, we're creeping in right where they should be bedded, where you're like, I don't know if we're going to get away with it. Then all of a sudden there he is again. And you're like, and other deer too. Like he wasn't the only one. And I was like, man, so often on pressure deer or like low density spots, that's the game. It's like an elk hunt, you know, where you're like, they're mostly not here, even though it looks great and there might be old sign, but somewhere that concentration is. And it actually reminded me of a big woods hunt where I can see.
Yeah. So you come off that, and now tonight or tomorrow you're leaving for Iowa. Yep. Public land, high deer density now.
Yep.
What's the game plan? We talked about this a little bit this summer when we were going through our plans for the year, because you've got high hopes for this trip. But right. Give me the latest. What's the latest as far as your game plan? What do you think you're going to do? So
just as a little context, I drew this tag in 2020, and that was when we filmed Back 40 together. So I had to do early October hunts, killed a good buck, killed a doe, had a great time, like a freaking great time. And I've been back down there because I try to turkey hunt there every year just to keep scouting it. And I've actually been down there just to look around, and I have this dilemma where I know this one spot has big deer and it's got this really cool meadow, and people, it's a hike to get there. So people seem to not like concentrate on it too much. And I know if I go volume hunt that, I'm going to run into a deer that I want to shoot. Like it's just, and I have the wind for it coming up. The predicted wind is south for like 7 days. So I'm not going to be playing that changing wind game, but I also know it's going to be pretty hot. It's going to be like 83 one day. And so I'm like, should I be hunting the river bottoms and the little stream spots that I have, and then maybe some of the ponds, which would make a better show if I'm, you know, moving around and trying to figure stuff out? Or do I go take that DSD doe up into that meadow and put her 20 yards out and just wait? And I know what I would probably do if I wasn't filming, and I would just go volume hunt that sucker and just have a ton of fun. Cause you can get in there in the morning if you plan it right, and you can sit all day. But I'm like, should I be looking around, see if I could find a difference, you know? And I have so many waypoints. I mean, I couldn't sleep this morning. I woke up super early cause I'm like, this is so dumb, but I have so many pins down there, and I had this pond marked the last time I went down there. And it's like tucked way in the woods, and you can just like see it if you're like really looking. And I cannot freaking find that. And I'm getting to the point where I'm like, did I imagine this? Like, what's going on here? And I know I didn't, because I remember dropping it when I was dropping some turkey pins. And I was like, I got to just look at that. Like, I just got to run in there when I'm running and gunning for turkeys and find it. And I can't find it. So I woke up this morning. I'm like, I'm going to find that freaking pond. And I didn't. So I don't know what happened. Like, but I did find a different one, and I was like, oh, that's going to work. So it's going to be fun. I'm very excited for this hunt.
So if I put a gun to your head and had to force you to pick what you think you're actually going to do, you going to go the run and gun waypoint chase or the volume hunt?
I think I'm going to chase those waypoints for a little bit. I think. I'm not gun to my head. You might as well just blow my brains out on the wall, buddy. Cause I don't know. I'm not sure yet. When I get down there, I'll have a better feel for it. But it's hard. I mean, that meadow is where I hit the biggest buck I've ever shot at. I sent my buddy in there last year. He had a giant, which might've been the same deer, come into a decoy. And there's a little bit of part of me that's like, if that is the same deer, and from his description, it sounded like it, and the exact same spot, I'm like, if that deer made it through, you're talking about a deer that, like, you know, he said he thought it was 180. When I hit it, I was pretty confident it was just a mainframe 12 that was pushing 170. And so you're like, if that deer's still out there, it's kind of hard not to go put some time and see if he shows up, you know? And so
if I were you, and I'm not giving you advice because you don't need my advice, but I would be sitting my butt right there and doing the thing that's fun, the thing that you think would be most fun, and the thing that gives you this possibility. Who cares if it becomes a show that's not that great? I think it's almost more interesting of a show when you do this thing. They're like, man, this could be brutal, just sitting here nonstop, but it also might be the best thing ever. And the decoy thing is going to be so cool. And even if you don't see that buck, there's going to be other bucks. You're going to get cool interactions. I don't know. I know. When I hit that buck, I saw 6 other bucks on that. That was the first morning of the season. And they weren't obviously that big, but there were like 140, 130, 125. Like, there were bucks. And some of those deer, because I hunted there again, I saw them again in there. So you're like, yeah. So I don't know. It's going to be hard not to. Plus, it's just you know how it is. Like, it's just a really cool setup that you can get into in the morning if you do it right. Like, you got to climb a big bluff and you got to sneak in there a little bit. But if you do it right, you have action from the get go. Can you help me understand a little better why this spot's so good for that pre-rut time period? Like, you said there's a meadow, you said it's far away from the road, but break it down a little bit more for me, like how this sets up, why there's so many bucks moving through here during the rut.
So there's a couple things, you know how those,
and then also, sorry, one more addition. Also, I'd love to know like how you're going to set up on this too, accounting for deer travel, wind, etc.
Right. So you know how much deer love, especially in like an ag heavy area, they love CRP type grass. They love like sumac islands, like brushy, soft, edgy stuff. This has that. And where it has it is on top of a ridge. It's not that easy to get to. And it feeds to a private, it's usually alfalfa. You can see it just barely, but a private ag field that I'm sure probably gets hunted, but doesn't get hunted like public land does. And so those deer, they can bed on that ridge top. They can leave their sign on that meadow. There's visibility. They stage there morning and evening, and they can get to a private field that's totally walled in on top of that. You can look at it on X and see that, like, there's nobody's going to see it from the road. Nobody's going to mess with it. So I think they're just very comfortable, and it's just far enough where it's like, there's so much good stuff you kind of got to go by to get there. And like, it's just the right setup, man. And I haven't explored the whole area, because every time I've been there, I've been hunting, but I've killed some turkeys in there and looked around, and it has probably the best bedding cover aside from that meadow. There's some like pine tree kind of scrubby hillsides in there. And so it has, like, if you were going to put a big buck in that area and he was going to find a place on public that was real safe, like, just, you know, like escape routes, bedding cover wise, he can move in daylight and not expose himself. He's probably not going to get like overrun with people. I mean, I found cameras in there and stands. Like, it's not a total secret, But it's just the right stuff. And you know how it is down there, even though there's quite a bit of woods where I'm hunting, like relative to a lot of Iowa, it's also that unbelievably beautiful deciduous forest that's pretty open. And so when you get to like a river bottom and you have that change in some of the, you know, a little more high stem count stuff, and you're like, okay, this is a different thing, even though it's a small patch of cover, that's a magnet, you know? And I think a lot of people walk in and there's so many good trees to set up in, and it looks like beautiful woods that a lot of them sort of just one layer in, I'm good. Because look, there's rubs here, there's scrapes, but when you want that all day sit and you want the bigger deer there, you know how it is. Like you better get somewhere with that security cover. And there's not a ton of it in this area.
So you've got this CRP-ishy, thick, meadowy zone that is then surrounded by that mature deciduous forest, and then it feeds out down the ridge to this field. Are you then hunting like the downwind side of that CRP field, or how are you setting up in relation?
Yep. So, I mean, the way that it's sort of shaped, you can get away with just about anything. So you can set up one side for a north wind, one side for a south wind. And if you get some west in there, which you often do, it's sort of like a wonky shape. So you can always get into a point or something, and your scent's generally going to fall off because it's really bluffy. And so you just have, and there's a fair amount of cedars in there too. So if you just got to tuck into the ground for whatever reason, it's huntable no matter what wind you get. You know, it would be different though if you had to cross it, you know, for a morning sit. Like I climb up to the edge, especially with a south or a west wind, and I don't have to expose myself in it. If you had to, that would be a little different story. So you'd have to play that game a little bit, but it's just one of those areas, man. And you know, they're visible enough so you can call to them. There's just enough of that like sumac type brush that they always just gravitate toward. And, you know, like when you see them leave a field at first light or whenever they start heading back to bed, they often hit those spots where they'll kill a couple hours, you know,
just milling around.
Right. But they're not visible, but they're kind of visible. And they're just like, I think those deer, they just sort of have that moment of dumb where they're like, I don't want to go back to bed yet. I'm feeling it. Like I'm making that rub. So when you call to those deer, they catch sight of a decoy. They're just sort of like more open to working. And that's the beauty of those spots.
Man, I like the sound of it a lot.
Dude, I have so many freaking pins drop down there because it's like, you know, might play the water game because it's going to be hot, but it's so bluffy, like real bluffs, that you get these pinch points along the rivers that are like, to me, are just so reliable during the rut, where you can look and you're like, get that one flat where a valley comes in, and then it's just a wall, like a vertical wall for 600 yards. And then there's another valley there. And you're like, you know, those are littered with sign and deer crossing all over, but to get between them, you know, they might go halfway up the hill or something, but most of the time there's that banging trail right along the bottom, and your wind can blow over the river. And you're like, everybody who wants to see both places is going to go through there.
Yeah. No shortage of options.
No, I'm excited, dude.
Okay, so that's your first rut trip, and then if you or when you tag out there, you're then gonna start hitting the Minnesota, Wisconsin stuff.
Yeah. One of my daughters has a buck tag left to fill, and then in Wisconsin, and then both of them have Minnesota tags. So I have a weird situation here in Minnesota where it's kind of hard to get them out. Like I have a place I can take them sometimes, but it's a long story. But my plan is get over to Wisconsin with them and get one more good hunt with them in before, you know, I got to go sit for myself here at some point. But yeah, I'm excited. I fully intend to watch at least a couple bucks get shot on a decoy here in the next, 3 weeks, I would say.
It's exciting. I'm gonna barrage you with some more questions about the decoy setup in a little bit. But we'll save that for our little tactic showdown of sorts. All right. I guess I'll walk you through my situation then, and then we can talk some strategy. So since we last talked, I killed a mid-October buck, and then re-examined some of my main Michigan stuff, did a hunt, did a kind of scouting day, moving cameras around, shifting some stuff around, trying to find the deer I have been after down in southern Michigan. And they've kind of disappeared off the map. When we talked in August, I had 2 bucks that I was after, and they had been really consistent the 2 years prior, and they were really consistent all summer. And then one of them disappeared on September 3rd. Nothing. And then one of them stayed consistent until October 3rd, and then he disappeared. That buck has still not shown up a single time on trail camera or in any of the times I've been out glassing. Haven't seen that deer. That's this big, tall 10-pointer that we're referring to as Bear. He's missing. The other one was this buck that's missing an eye. I found his match set this spring. He's a 5-year-old. And he, was so consistent in years past. And he disappeared, like I said, September 3rd. For 6 weeks, didn't see hide or hair of him. And then I got one trail camera video of him this past weekend. And that's it. So I have one confirmation of life in a 7-week period.
What do you think happened?
Dude, I have zero idea. I mean, he's a 5-year-old, and usually when they get that old, they're pretty well settled into their thing. I don't think I've ever had a buck that was really consistent at 3 and 4, and then just totally changed at 5. And I went back and looked at my pictures and observations, like my notes from last year. And from October through December, really through February of last year, almost every single day, I had him on one of the properties I can hunt, and a lot of daylight, a lot of activity. He was all over the place for the last 2 years. And now he's just gone. And I haven't, and it's not because I've been in there. Like, I have not gone into the core of this property, this couple properties at all. I've not hunted it yet. So I have glassed from the road. I've hunted edge stuff and glassed. I've done observation stands. I have a good number of cameras around in places that historically he's been hitting. I don't know.
Dude, I'm going to throw a theory out here just because of something I ran into, and I'm probably pretty sure it's not your case, but I've had, so this property I'm hunting by my house, the deer mostly disappeared except for this one little wood lot. And I actually took one of my daughters in there. We were mostly trying to call in a turkey, but maybe a deer is going to come in. And I called in 3 flocks of turkeys, and it was chaos. They were scratching the whole time. The amount of like fresh acorns that we were dealing with in there was like, for this time of year, it really caught me off guard. And then where I saw that 2-year-old chasing the other morning, I saw 10 deer off the stand, which is a lot. Like, usually I don't see any deer on this property. Every one of them, 3 bucks, 7 does and fawns, all hit like a small patch of oaks that I know they weren't hitting a couple weeks ago, because I was in there and killed a deer. Like, I'm like, it's crazy when something like that happens where you're like, I don't factor acorns into this time of year ever. But last year in North Dakota, on that film that just dropped, those deer were on specific trees. I mean, it's plain stuff, so they're not that many trees, but those bucks were like, that was clearly like that was the destination. It's not like there isn't a whole bunch of ag around there. There's a ton of it, but they were like, they weren't chasing last year during that blizzard. It was like they were going to that freaking tree or another tree to eat. And then I'm seeing it again now, and I'm like, are we kind of like missing something like that? Where is it like, did they just move over to bulk up on that food source, and they'll get back?
Yeah, I hope that's the case. I hope that they're just back in there. And I've got one camera back in a kind of oak flatty area, but that camera stopped sending pictures recently. So, maybe that's the thing. But I should, here's my plan. Given this mystery, I've been, playing it safe, waiting, in this case, but it's the end of October. Now I'm going to go on discovery mode, and I'm going to go in and just start searching. Because at this point, there's no use hunting the stuff I have been hunting where they are not, and they haven't been showing the places that I've been able to see to this point. So now I'm going to start going and seeing these places that I have not observed yet. I'm going to explore. and try to re-find them. So tonight, tomorrow, this whole upcoming like 4 or 5 days, I'm going to go and check out spots that I have not touched yet this year, search it out, look for signs, scout, hunt spots where I can see a little ways, but be back in cover. I'm going to start hunting mornings now, tight to the edge of some of these bedding areas, back in some of these oak flats. And, that should tell me something, hopefully. And
aren't you doing an up north hunt too?
Yes, ish. I am doing, this is like I'm not sure you know about this most recent shift, but I'm doing just a quick 2-day up north hunt with my dad. We're going to try to get back up to our deer camp here, like very beginning of November, and try to get him. We were trying to get him an archery buck last year up there. We spent like about a week and had like horrible conditions and very, very slow up movement. But man, the deer there's some big deer up there this year, and a lot of, relatively for us, a lot of bucks. And so I just know it's a matter of time before it's going to work out. And I'd really love to be up there with him. So I'm able to get up there for 2 days with him at the beginning of November. So we're going to do that. Hopefully get a crack for him.
Do you have a spot there where you could run that doe decoy?
Yeah, but yeah, we have like, I just worry it'd be so tight. I'd be worried about, I've got like the biggest opening I could do it is it's like a half acre food plot, maybe 3/4 of an acre. And I've never thought about using decoys up there, just in a low deer density area. I don't know. You've done that up north in northern Wisconsin. So you tell me, is that crazy to try that? Would they come out of that thick stuff and come into this little opening and be shocked by that? Or do you think that might be?
I don't know. I'd have to see it, but a doe decoy I would consider. And I think that was sort of the secret to our success last year was the low deer density thing. You think about those bucks up there and you know how it is. Like you can hunt a week and see like 3 deer, and so they're dealing with that low deer density too. So if they pop in the other end of the food plot and they see a doe over there, they're coming. Like if you get a buck that sees that, he's going to go check it out.
And I guess like the thing I always worry about decoys is that does come on it, freak out, make a whole hubbub and spook everything. But there's not that many does in this area. So the chances of that happening are relatively low. And even if it does happen, it's a relatively low odds that that's going to blow up, the one buck that might be half a mile away at the moment who's still cruising our direction. It's not like there's 20 deer all around that are going to get messed up.
Dude, I haven't had as many really bad doe reactions out of that DSD doe as some of the other ones I've used in the past, but it's still, when you think about that possibility and then you think about putting it on a relatively small opening, like you definitely don't want to surprise does with a decoy. Like you could get away with it with some bucks for sure, but does are not gonna,
right?
They're not gonna treat you very well.
Yeah. It's an interesting idea though. Although now, as you say it, it's outside of my possibility set because I don't have a doe decoy. I've got the buck, but I don't have the doe.
Dude, make that phone call, buddy. Send that email.
I guess I could.
You're Mark Kenyon.
That's never worked for me before, Tony, but I'll try.
You're one of the top 100 hunters in that one corner of Michigan where you live.
that might be true. That one little corner. That's a bet I'm willing to take. I got to ask you another question though, or I got to pose another dilemma for you. So in that southern Michigan, back to southern Michigan, I'm telling you about how I've lost my 2 bucks that I know for sure are mature, and my plan is to try to find them and seek, kind of just explore the area. But I have this other possible situation that I'm torn on. And that is this buck that I sent you pictures and videos of. He showed up for the first time the day I killed that really tall brow tine buck in mid-October in a different area. And I was back scouting this area I guess it would have been probably the next day I was glassing and saw this deer. And so that was mid-October. And since then, so the last almost 2 weeks now, he's been all over these properties and daylighting and showing up a bunch. He wants to get shot. But I can't decide what to do about him because I'm a little worried he's 3, and I don't like to shoot 3-year-olds in this area because I know, like, if I don't, there's a decent chance they can make it to 4 or 5. And that's usually what the last handful of years I've been just chasing 5-year-olds. And so this deer is like a tweener. I'm like, is he 3? Is he 4? Do I want to hold out for the deer I know are mature and that I've hunted for a while? Or this is a pretty darn nice buck. I certainly wouldn't pass this deer if I was like traveling somewhere on a quick hunt or on public land or like, something where I was time limited. But in this situation where I know the area, I have time, I don't know what to do, Tony. What are your thoughts on that buck in my situation?
Shoot that son of a bitch. Who cares?
I knew that's what you were to say.
First off, shoot him and send in his teeth and then come back to me and tell me what he ages, because you might be very surprised. Secondly, shoot that son of a bitch. Who cares?
He is a nice deer, isn't he?
Mark, you work in the hunting industry. Shoot him and go out of state. Go somewhere else.
I know. But I'm torn, man. I'm torn because I also like the idea of shooting a nice buck, but then I also like the idea of trying to find like the really old one that I know well. And like, I know that doesn't do it for you, but I also am like a masochist. I guess that'd be like, I kind of like the suffering of like waiting to try to find that deer. So I really don't know.
I mean,
and
that's just a different calculus though. I mean, you can do that because you have a legitimate chance of letting him go and having him come back, but I just shoot him.
I mean, I recognize like it would be different if it was a trip where I knew I didn't have any other time, but this is like that situation where here's what happened. If I shoot that deer, I'd be happy and it'd be a great experience and a cool deer. But if one of those other 2 bucks all of a sudden showed up the next week and was like all over the place, then I'd be kicking myself. And I'd be like, oh man, I should have waited because now this buck's back that I really, really was wanting to get after. And then I'd be getting pictures of him all fall, or I'd go out there, shoot does, and I'd be seeing these bucks and I'd be thinking, what an idiot. I should have waited because look at that tank. He's a monster. And I don't know if that's how I'd feel or not, but that's what I'm worried about. So that's how I don't know. It's all going to probably come down to if that deer shows up in front of me, how I feel, and if it gets me freaking out excited or not. But I do know every time when I've been out glassing and I've caught him in my binos, a couple times now I've been out there and filmed him and saw him. And both times I was like, whoa, big buck. And then I'm like, oh, it's that 1 buck. But at first I'm always like, whoa.
So
that's an impressive deer.
I've been thinking about this a lot. I think that you should step back from looking at whitetail hunting like it's such an academic pursuit and look at it and go, would it be really fun for you to go, you know what? That son of a bitch is number 1 on my list and I'm going to go in and try to kill him. Or would it not be fun?
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
I don't know.
Would you enjoy that?
I don't know. That's like, here's the thing, Tony, is like, if I was actually talking to one of our mutual friends about this just yesterday and how
who's that?
Garrett.
Oh,
and,
dude, let me tell you a Garrett story quick.
He listens to these podcasts, so be warned.
I know, it's great. I talked to him this morning and he answered the phone and he's like, I'm like, dude, did I catch you in a workout or what? He's like, no, I'm just coyote hunting. I just shot a coyote. I was like, whoa, buddy. Nice. Anyway,
he gets really into it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we were just talking the other day though about this very thing and how you and I are actually so different on this. You, as you just described, like the most fun thing for you would be shooting a buck, that you get the chance at. And I was kind of talking to Gare about how I totally get that, but I'm kind of the opposite in that I actually might enjoy the pursuit of the thing that I am like actually the thing I set my sights on originally for whatever reason. I'd be fine not killing anything, but then pursuing that possibility. So if I didn't feel any kind of pressure to fill a tag because of what we do and everything, I might not kill a buck for years at a time. Maybe if there wasn't the deer that I was really excited about in certain situations like this where I can do that. So I don't know, but I'm like I said, I'm very torn on this because sometimes you like a surprise. Surprise is great, and you take a gift. You don't look a gift horse in the mouth. And then sometimes I'm like, gosh, I really do love the try to figure this buck out kind of deal.
Let me ask you this about your hunting. Because one of the reasons that I have gone the route that I go is because it just, for whatever reason, my favorite thing is to walk out on public land and figure it out. Like the years that I don't get to do that enough, I feel like I'm missing something, and I listen, I like the private land hunts. I like setting up stands ahead of time. Like I understand it and I like it, but that's like just the thing that hums for me. I'm wondering with you, like, do you think at this point you've got those deer figured out well enough where this buck, if he's daylighting a whole bunch and he's been there and he's on all your cameras, there's probably a pretty good chance you're going to go work that deer and kill him, right? And so is this one of those things where you're like, you've gotten to know these deer in this area so well that like there's just a miss, even though that buck would look amazing and like definitely would be a deer almost everybody would shoot. But for you, because of this specific circumstance and the amount of time you put in, you're like torn between trying to represent the person who would shoot that deer because most people would, but in your very specific situation, it's just not going to give you what you need out of a hunt for a deer there.
Yeah, something like that kind of maybe feels like what I'm feeling, where it almost feels like, I don't know. I'm having a hard time even explaining it to myself, but yeah, for whatever reason, I kind of feel like it almost seems too easy to kill that deer right now. Just based on, man, he's been everywhere and I've been seeing him and I've not gone in after him because I'm waiting for this other deer to show back up. And then when I got proof of life of the 5-year-old, I was like, oh man, like that's the buck I really want to get a crack at. But I don't know if this deer marches in front of me at 20 yards and just hangs out working a scrape tonight, who knows? Maybe in the moment I'm just going to have to send it. Right. I don't know.
But I mean, so the real lesson here though, I think is if people are listening to this, they're like, I would go in there and shoot that deer. Like I would be so happy to have that setup, but it's like a careful what you wish for thing, and people like say this to me a lot. Like I own those 2 properties in Wisconsin. I almost never hunt them. I almost always just go hunt the big woods public land because I just like it better. And it's like, you just have to go, like, we're so focused on like, gotta kill whatever size of buck. And this is like, just like across the board with hunters, but you get enough experience and enough time out there and you go, what is the thing that I want to go out there today for? And, it changes. Like I was thinking about this when I missed that big one in North Dakota. I was like, that would have wrecked me. I mean, when 10, 15 years ago, that would have been like a season ruining thing. And I was like, I don't even really care. Like, because I get to keep doing this thing I want to do so bad in a place I want to do it in. And so I think that the hard part that we have is we understand that there's that difference, right? Like you understand what you're saying. Like, in your heart what you want to do. You don't really want to kill this deer because you're going to kill him probably. And so it's like, whatever, like I want that next thing. And that's a hard message to pass on to people because not everybody has that spot.
Well, and I think here's where I settle on, and what my for anyone listening to this and thinking we sound like crazy people, which is probably the case. I think where I'm at and what I might suggest people take away from all of this is to just do what's fun for you and to not care about what other people think. That's what I'm trying to remind myself is I think I'm feeling this like internal pressure in my head of like, people will think you're nuts if you don't kill that deer. You're stupid. And then if I don't kill a buck out here, then they'll think I'm doubly stupid because I passed on that super nice buck that anyone who's not a lunatic in Michigan would shoot. But what might actually be most fun for me might be passing on that deer and just seeing if the possibility of one of these 2 older bucks coming back does pan out. That might end up being what's most fun for me. It'd give me the most joy. And I think I'm just going to, what I am going to do is I'm going to trust my gut and trust what is most enjoyable for me, despite any outside pressures or outside perspectives. In saying that also might in the moment change. And it might be, man, that deer is awesome, seeing him up close. And I do want to take a crack at that deer. Maybe that'll turn out to be the case, but maybe it'll be the opposite. Maybe I'll watch him and be like, man, that's a beautiful deer. I'd love to see him next year or maybe even later this year. But for now, I want to kind of see how the next couple weeks pans out, and maybe one of these other deer comes back. And you know what? I've got enough meat in the freezer by the 2 bucks I've killed already and the does I'm going to kill in the coming, month or two. And if I don't kill a second Michigan buck, I'll survive. Or maybe I do. And then I'm sitting really pretty. But I guess I kind of want to just get back to just making sure it's fun, and do it for your own reason. Every one of us has a different little thing that we prefer. Like you just described, you've got a certain thing that really hums for you. I've got a certain thing that really hums for me. Everyone's different. And the more we can remove any outside noise and not worry about what our friends would think or what the neighbors would think or what anyone on social media would think, I think we'd be a lot happier hunters if we did that.
Right. I mean, I'll give you an example to frame this up. I write a lot about just figure out how to hunt a spot. Like if you find a spot, like that meadow I'm talking about, right? If you didn't have good trees there, I'd be on the ground in a heartbeat, ground blind, no ground blind, natural blind, whatever. And I push that partially because it's just good advice. Like if you find where the deer are, you should just figure out how to hunt them. But also sometimes you just figure out the stuff that's just more fun. Like with my daughters, we've been in pop-up ground blinds their whole hunting career. Turkeys and deer up until last year, just a little bit. I started taking them out and just having them sit on the ground and we do a natural ground blind. And then this year they both killed deer in Wisconsin from just natural ground blinds where you're way more exposed and you see them coming. And both of my daughters were like, I don't ever want to get back into pop-up. This is better. And so we tend to kind of lean toward what's like the easiest, most effective way. And so like a box blind is a great example, right? Like I have a lot of buddies who they almost only hunt rednecks or whatever, which are super effective. But like you might like that for 3-4 seasons and go, you know what? I need to get back out there and do something different. But trying that different stuff is such an easy way to sort of tap into what you need out of it. And that stuff changes, like your priorities change depending on where you hunt, where you go, like how much time you have. Like you said, how much meat do you have in the freezer already? None, and so I just think hunting with my little girls that way, when they both said that afterwards, I'm like, it's like a key tenet of what we have to pay attention to. It's like so simple, but it's nice to be reminded of it.
Yeah, so true. Especially it's such a good reminder this time of year too, because right, for all of us, when we get to the rut, we've been building and building up to this moment. It's so easy to get obsessed with the actual, I got to kill a buck. I got to fill the tag. I got to do the whatever, the thing you've been preparing for, the thing you've been working towards, the thing you've been dreaming about. And so there's so much pressure building up to this moment. And for some of us, I know we've both had moments like this. You end up being stressed out and not enjoying yourself during the rut and grinding yourself to a pulp. And then, you're chasing this thing you think you want because you've built up to this moment, and then you end up not enjoying the process because you're so stressed out or upset about the things that went wrong or mistakes you made or the fact that the deer is not showing or whatever. And that's such a shame to have that. Like this should be the most fun part of the year. And if you're doing anything that is taking the fun out of it, I think you got to reassess the situation and try to reset where you're at, because at least as far as I'm concerned, the rut all season, but especially this time of year, this should be like the most joyful celebration of hunting. This should not be, the suffer fest grind of misery, which oftentimes it becomes if we are not careful.
Right. Well, and one of the things that really hits home with me every rut is how I sort of, and I'm sure a lot of people do this, but I sort of go into it with this feeling of like, I just volume hunt this spot, or I just it's going to be a dumbed down thing. Like we're all just so fatigued by making decisions about our lives all day long with the kids and everything. And like, we look at this, like I could just go take it easy and sit that stand and they'll come to me. And so often I still have to go to them. Like you still have to play the sign game. And if you see them all crossing through that one brushy fence or whatever, like you can try to call them over, you can try to decoy them over, but your best bet is to get right on top of them and work them. And the rut doesn't relieve you of those responsibilities. Like you still have to work them.
Very true. And that is a perfect segue to what I think we should call the Whitetail Rut Rumble Last Man Standing competition.
Wow.
Yeah, just came up with that on the fly, Tony.
Nailed it. It's a little long.
Just rolls off the tongue, though, I think. Here's what I want to do. To wrap this sucker up. I can't remember if we've done this in the past and I'm forgetting, or if it's just an idea I had and we never actually did it. But I want to just go back and forth with Whitetail Rut tactics or strategies or ideas. And we'll go back and forth. Each of us share a quick tip, and then the next person shares a quick tip, and we'll go back and forth until someone runs out of ideas or we run out of time.
All right.
So that's how I'm thinking we're going to get to 39 specific actionable rut hunting tactics, or maybe it'll be more. I guess that's a question. Do you think will we be over or under 39?
39's a lot, bud. I'm gonna say under, but just barely.
All right. So let's see where we get in our. I don't know. I've got another meeting, and then I've got to run to the tree. And so maybe we've got 10, 15 minutes left ish, unless this really gets momentum. So, all right, you go first, Tony.
If you don't know what to do during the rut, hunt water. So reliable.
Water out in the open or water deep in the cover?
Deep in the cover if you have it. Those does that are getting pushed around get thirsty.
And how?
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, how do you set up on water?
Depends what kind of water, right? If it's a creek, it's a different story. I love a little water hole in the woods. If I can hunt a pond, I'm gonna get. Obviously, you got to read it a little bit, but just if you talk ponds, you can look at them and see where they approach them. Some ponds out west they'll be ringed with tracks, right? But a lot of ponds in the Midwest and the East, you'll find that one part where that's where they drop down to drink. For whatever reason, they can see better, or it's just easier access. That's where you want to be, because those does are going to bring those bucks in there.
All right. All right. I would say when trying to choose best possible stand sites during the rut, I like locations with compounding features. So best case scenario, I don't want to be just a pinch point. I don't want to be somewhere that's just a doe bedding area. I don't want something that's just close to a scrape. I want all of these things compounding and layering. So give me like a layer cake stand, a stand that is downwind of a doe bedding area where there's a pinch point and there's a creek crossing. So there's like a double pinch, and there's a big inside the cover scrape that's within range, or there's a gap in the fence, or there's a oak tree that's dropping down acorns back in there too. I want layers for those locations where I'm going to spend big periods of time. I love that kind of location in the rut. So I don't ever want to hunt somewhere just for one reason. I want it to be like 3 or more things going for that spot.
Right. My next one would be, most people don't do all day sits. They just don't, whatever. They don't have the time, patience, whatever. I would say one of the most important things to do if you don't want to just go pull all dayers for several days in a row is look at your weather app, whatever you use. And when you see a weather change, try to be there. And I'm not talking like we all know the huge cold fronts, but man, you see sometimes where the wind's been out of some direction for a long time and it's just going to switch. Usually that's prefrontal, but it doesn't have to be, or even like a little temperature drop, or for some reason, Thursday afternoon, there's going to be just like intermittent rain, just a little bit, just going to blow through. Like when you sort of get those like fits and starts during the chasing and the, the activity. And it's like, it doesn't really matter what time of day it is. When something like that changes, especially if you've been in a holding pattern for a couple of days, it doesn't have to be that like 40-degree temperature drop, just something. It often gets them on their feet. I mean, even if if you sit out there in the rain all day, like we did in 1 week in November, a couple years ago, and it just lightens up by like a few degrees, that puts them on their feet and moving again. And so you can sort of be really targeted around weather, and it doesn't have to be that big front.
Yeah, I like that. And I'll jump in with one that's kind of a piggyback off that. and kind of ties into a little bit of what we were talking about a minute. That being, trying to be smart with how we hunt the rut and how we manage like our mental and emotional or fun level, I guess, just managing the mental side of things during the rut. And I say this because I came from like a history when I first started taking this really serious, where I thought, you kill deer with brute force in time in the stand, and you hunt every single minute of every single day. You hunt all day, every single day. And if you don't, you are not giving it 150% and you suck because of that. And that's an approach that can work. But if you are not having fun anymore, or if you've done this for 9 straight days and you are so wore down that not only are you miserable, but you're also losing focus and you're not with it and you're not really able to pay attention and execute well, you end up losing more opportunities because of that and not have fun along the way. So I would suggest, at least what I have started doing, is I have given myself forgiveness. I'm forgiving myself for occasionally not hunting all day, or occasionally, looking at the weather forecast, like you're saying, and seeing like, man, there's an 85-degree day, on November 1st or October 29th or whatever it is. And if you're hunting a whole big week or 10 days or something, give yourself permission to sleep in one morning, or give yourself permission to come in midday a time or two and go do the breakfast with your friends or do lunch with your friends and do the things that make the whole experience fun and that also kind of refill your energy tank. Because if you don't manage that, more time in the tree, you could say that's better. But if you're in the tree but miserable, or in the tree and not actually mentally there, it might not be worth it. So I have found giving myself a couple moments to recoup actually makes me a more effective hunter down the line.
I'm going to piggyback on that. I'm going to say I do a fair amount of all day sits, and it has to be a sit in the cover where I just believe in my heart of hearts that whatever pinch point funnel, whatever feature pond, whatever that I'm on is going to draw them. Like I think that people hear the all day advice and they go, well, I'll go sit that box blind, or I'll go sit that, my favorite stand on the cut corn. And it's like, that might be great for 2.5 hours a day and might be worthless for cruising bucks for the rest of the time. Like that, if you're going to do an all day sit, unless you're in the heart of it in Iowa or something where you just have like a really good property and they could just be bouncing all over. For most people, you have to set yourself up for that all day sit. It's not just go sit wherever you like to. It's like, you got to be in that place that's just vibrating with deer activity. Cause that's, if you don't have that second guessing comes in, sun comes up, whatever, like you're going to talk yourself into leaving. But if you're like, I know at some point today, a buck is going to run through this funnel. It's like, it's so much easier to stay. Plus when you're in the cover, you hear squirrels and like, there's a different vibe to the whole thing where you're like a little bit more paying attention and it just feels more possible.
So true. So mine will be piggybacking off of that in saying that if you find yourself struggling to hunt all day, but you want to do it and you're excited to do it, one little like cheat code way to get through an all day hunt a little bit better is to make a move. So you're still basically hunting all day, but just get down and shift to a new spot. I would personally, if I were to pick a time of day to do my move, I would typically say it's going to be after the midday. So it'd be like maybe 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock, because I like, there's of course your first light movement. And then there seems to be that late morning cruising that happens somewhere between like 10 and 1. Maybe if I had to put a window, that seems to be a window when like a mature buck's going to get back on his feet and check doe bedding area. So I don't want to be leaving that if I don't have to, but it seems like if I had to pick a spot where there's oftentimes a lull, it'd be that 1 or 2 o'clock to 3 o'clock, maybe somewhere in there. That's when I will typically, if I'm trying to do an all day sit but want to shift locations, that's a good time to do it. And then it also sets you up well because that morning through the midday can be great back in the cover like you're describing, but sometimes those spots slow down for the last hour of daylight. And so if you want to make a move at 3 o'clock to a more evening specific location, that might set you up for the best of both worlds.
Right. I'm going to Am I going to piggyback on you piggybacking on me piggybacking? I'm not sure. I would say I do want to talk about the all day sit thing. One, like, let's just push this a little bit more. Anything you can do. So if you can't sit in a tree stand all day for whatever reason, sit in a ground blind. Like if you can stretch out, or like the midday move thing, like you said, one of the things that I did in North Dakota this year that was like a game changer, which is going to sound dumb, is I brought my little elk stove and I brought some of those peak refuels. So instead of making sandwiches to eat for 7 days in a row, we'd get out of stand midday to move because we were out there all day. And we'd go sit on the riverbank, cook up some macaroni and cheese or whatever we had, dude. And it was like, you got some energy and you're like, it was just like a nice break. We didn't leave where the deer are, but we just like, that was like the way to make it through. And I think, I remember Eddie Claypool talks about this a lot, or he used to, but I remember thinking like, it would be insane to bring a book hunting, or it'd be insane to like have 2 thermoses of coffee if that's what you need. I'm like, take whatever you have to take. If reading a book is what's going to keep you out there or whatever. Cause like you said, when you actually get that buck that comes through at 11 o'clock or 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock, that you can live off of that for a long time. Like that's a powerful motivator to keep doing those all day sits. And it's mostly not going to happen, but when it does, it's amazing. And so just figure out how to put that time in if you have the time.
Yeah. And you're right. Snacks, food, man, that makes a huge difference.
Yeah. My daughter just got braces, so she says snacks. And it's great.
My son just lost his second big tooth, so now he's missing his 2 front teeth, and he's got an interesting little lisp thing going on too. So you brought up food. So my snack hack is that I bring enough snacks, and then I bring enough snacks to be able to parse them out on like a schedule. So
of course you do.
Of course I do, right? That's the most Mark Kenyon thing ever. But the way I do it is I like assign, like every hour I'm able to pick something else out of my snack bag. And then I know like I have to look forward to, all right, 10 o'clock, I get the Oreos. And then like, all right, 11 o'clock, if you can just make it to 11, you're going to get the bag of dried mangoes or whatever. And so just throughout the day, you've got these little 1 hour celebrations that you get to look forward to throughout that long day that just give you that tiny little bit of extra something. And that's always helped me with the all days too.
Dude, it's incredible how many people I talk to about all day sits who will say, I try to not have my first drink of coffee as long as I can. So I delay that, because you get colder and colder and tired, and you're like, I just delay, because you're only 20 ounces of coffee or whatever, like you can drink it. And so you're like, a lot of people I talk to who do all day sits will talk about that. Like I try to save it as late into the morning as I can, because it's like this amazing reward.
So do you drink coffee on all day sits?
Oh, dude, I would shoot coffee directly into my eyeballs on all day sits if I could.
See, I'm always worried about possibly incurring the wrath of the coffee's diuretic effects and having one of those. So I usually don't drink coffee on all day sits, although I have toyed with it and occasionally do, but I'm always a little paranoid.
I just go nuts for donuts, buddy. That's a Jesus take the wheel moment for me because I'm drinking that coffee.
Okay, so my snack attack tip was the last one. You're next.
Well, switch gears here. So I just wrote a foundation script and an article about hunting with decoys. And one of the things that I kind of focused on, or at least one aspect of it, is when you put a decoy out, you are inviting the deer right into something that you've touched, like right into an area. And so there's a risk reward thing with these rut tactics, right? So calling's different, but if you want to put out a scent wick with some doe pee on it, what's the risk that you're going to touch something or leave scent there or disturb that area that you're inviting deer in versus the reward, like the likely reward of a buck getting downwind, turning in on it, right? So I look at that stuff and I go, I don't ever do it. Like if I'm good enough to get a buck to smell that and come in, I'm good enough to get him right where I want to shoot him anyway. But a decoy is different. And so I'm like, that risk is worth it because I know I can call a deer in from very far away with that and in multiple directions. So it's always like, I think people look at it as like, it's kind of a safe play, right? Like I'm going to put out some scent wicks down by that scrape or whatever. But it's like, if that little forky comes in, you don't want to kill and he gets wiggy about it and blows, or you get a doe that walks by. It's like, was that worth it? So like think about that stuff. Cause we look at a lot of rut tactics like that as it's just like, I'm just going to do it. And it's like additive. It doesn't have a negative possibility, but it does.
Yeah, very true. So you bring up another thought for me when it comes to using decoys and or calls, and my rut calling approach that I would suggest, or at least that's worked well for me, has been using like an escalator approach. And so by that, I mean, I start at the bottom of my calling escalator, and then I will advance up the escalator in aggressiveness if I have to, but I am reading the deer's body language before shifting up a notch with each one. And if I can stop low on the escalator, I will. So what I mean by that is, number one, if I can, I will start with just like a contact grunt first, just like a bop, and hopefully get a buck's attention with that. And again, this is if I see a buck. I'm not doing I don't blind grunt really ever. This is only if I see a buck that I'm trying to call into range. I will start with something relatively subtle. And if I can get him to hear that and get a reaction out of him, then I'll stop there if possible. So you're watching to see what he does. Does he turn? Does he pin his ears back? Does he puff up? Does he start to come your way? Then anything like that, I'm saying, okay, great, I'm done. If he doesn't hear it at all, well, then I'm going to try to turn up the notch next. Or if he kind of perks up, hears it, but then just keeps on going his way, then I might try to escalate to the next level, which typically for me would be more of like a buck roar or growl, just like a more aggressive, like brah, brah, something like that. And so that would be my next step up. And again, I'm watching body language, trying to see what he's going to do. What does he think about this? And if at any point along this pathway or like up this path, I see him negatively react, which would be like tucking his tail and turning and walking away, or in any kind of way showing like, I don't like this, I just stop. If you see anything like that, I have never once seen a buck react like that and then maybe keep pushing it and then turn him around. It's never worked for me. So it's almost always better to bail if you start seeing something like that. And then the final thing would be a snort wheeze. So that would be to the top of my escalator. If he just hasn't heard it, or if he's kind of just like hanging out, or if he's kind of circling you but not coming in, maybe then you throw the snort wheeze, which is like the final flipping him off, challenging him to a fight, especially if this is like a big old mature buck that you would think would want to dominate. Like that's the final move. And so that is my escalator approach to calling during the rut, and what I would do if you see a buck that's out of range, want to get him in.
Right. I would take that. I guess maybe this isn't even all that related. One of the things that I noticed during my rut hunts a lot is I will get married to an idea. Like I have some stuff over in Wisconsin set up. I set some stuff here in Minnesota for the rut when I get back from Iowa, and I'm very confident that they're going to work. But I also know from history that there's a very good chance they won't work. And so often, like rut hunting is an in the moment thing this year, but I've been sitting on stands my whole life and watched deer do things where I'm like, why? Like, why didn't he just cross here below where this ravine blows out? And it's like just a perfect pinch point. Like what's up there 125 yards uphill that they keep using? And you start to figure out, like, even if you see a forky, even if you see like just not anywhere near your target class of buck or whatever, and they do something, they're not lying. Like they're using that wind and they're using that terrain, and they're giving you a glimpse into the future because another buck is going to do that. And so often I will sit something where I'm like, this is it. This is the X on the X. Like I'm done. And I'll see those deer halfway up the hill over and over, or, cutting through that patch of cedars out there in that no man's land. And you go, there's something I don't know. Like that's better than this. And instead of like mind grinding on it, it's like, just go. Like just believe what they're telling you. And if not this year, you better mark that and have that, winter scout that and get that ready for next year, because it's going to come into play.
Yeah. Yeah. And I've seen the flip side of that though, too. So my next one would be, sometimes the opposite might be the case, in which, or at least I have been guilty of this in the past, where I would see a buck, like during the rut, I'll see a buck do something. And so I race over to go hunt there. And then that day I'm sitting there and then I see a buck do something back where I was or somewhere else. So then I race over to hunt over there. And then I see a buck do something different. So then I race over it, and then I'm just bouncing around from place to place to place. Sometimes, not always, but sometimes if you have a spot that like historically, bucks will move through here, or this is the X, or there's a really good reason for them to pass through. Sometimes it pays to volume hunt or to stick to a spot like that and just give it a little bit of time, because, if you just constantly are chasing, you never give any one spot enough time to actually produce. But if you give one of these spots, 12 hours or 2 days, or whatever it is, the appropriate amount of time, and if you know that, yes, like this is a place where it will happen, sometimes it does pay to give it time and to not chase one-offs, but to allow yourself to trust the process, trust the place. And the trick is like balancing what you shared and what I shared, because there's value in both. You got to know when to do one and when to do the other.
There's a clock management aspect of it, where I really think that if you believe in a spot, you should at least give it one full day with the right wind. And if it doesn't produce, like you got to just go, is this worth the next couple of days? And this is where trail cameras in the rut come in too, because people use trail cameras all the time to be like, oh, they're moving at night, or they're not moving or in the day or whatever, or they're chasing now and they weren't before, or they're not chasing today or something like that. But I look at it and I go, if I have some pictures of a good one going through a spot, even if it's nighttime, even if it was, sporadically over the last 3 weeks, nothing where you'd be like, I'm going to hunt him and kill him. That's one of his routes. So how much time, and what if there's 3 of them that sporadically use it? Like, now do you go, that's not a 1 day spot. That might be, give it 3 days if the wind is right for you and the conditions are right. Like I have that situation in Wisconsin like that, where it's not consistent, but I think on average, maybe 1 out of every 3 days during the rut, a good one goes through there. So I'm going to try to give it 5 or 6 days, give myself that cushion and do that. But if I'm in there and on day 3, I've seen all of them go through somewhere else, it's time,
Yeah. Yeah. Especially in those low deer density areas like that you're describing, those spots really need that time. So here's one where I would suggest making an immediate move, or at least most scenarios like this. If you see a buck locked down with a doe and they go into some patch of cover, and I know this might be different in certain areas of the country where the habitat's different, but at least in the places where I've seen this happen the most, like mixed timber, ag, kind of stuff like that, I have oftentimes seen, if you spot a buck that is actively locked on a doe, tending that doe, standing with the doe, they will oftentimes stick to a pretty small area of cover for a long time, for a day or two, for a couple days. And so if I see that, I will, whenever the next opportunity is for me to move, I'm going to move as tight as I can into that zone where I saw them, with a strong belief that they will be back the next day or that afternoon or that morning or whatever the situation is. I want to get as close and into that zone as possible. And then I will grind it out in that spot for, 48 hours maybe, because that oftentimes can be a great way to get one of these deer. They do not most of the time, you're not going to have a buck that's, again, like not chasing a doe. I'm saying like when you see them standing for 4 hours together in a thicket, that's going to be a spot they're probably going to be back in that zone again. So move on that for sure. I've seen that. I've had a lot of close calls on that, and a couple times have killed deer because of that.
I'm gonna talk about that a little bit. So we break this down to like pre-rut, testing each other out, laying down sign, chasing a little bit. And then you got the just bonkers chase phase. And then you have the lockdown. And we talk about this it's like a hard and fast rule for X amount of days, then X amount of days, then X amount of days. It doesn't work that way. Like it changes for sure. Like the activity does definitely morph over time. But when we say like, I think that patience kills big bucks. Like I think the more time you put in, just the better. But it doesn't have to be dark to dark from November 3rd to November 7th. Like you start on Halloween or whenever, the last week of October, and you get a day here and a day there and a day there, and you can go deep into November, deeper than a lot of people think. You start getting into the middle of November where everybody's like, oh, it's just not happening anymore because it's lockdown. It's like, I don't know, man. If you're ever going to kill that 160 that lives in the swamp most of the time, he might be more vulnerable on November 15th than he is on November 1st. And so it's like, you don't have to just concentrate everything on that first week of November. Like take the time that you can get and use it, because you have a 3-week window, maybe more, to catch some level of the rut. And I think we sort of like forget that sometimes, that it's like, it's very possible on November 15th, just as it is on the 1st.
Yeah, so true. So this is something that I have learned the hard way sometimes, and I think is most applicable to people if you are hunting public land or a newer spot there where maybe you don't have a ton of confidence in any one given setup. But I think it's not an infrequent thing for there to be days during the rut where it is on fire in one spot and absolutely dead in another. Like especially, I think this tends to happen a little bit earlier in the rut when there's like that first hot doe or the first few hot does, and like every buck in the area is on that doe chasing her around, right? I mean, how many days have you had where it is absolutely dead by you, and then your buddy who's 400 yards away was like, dude, it was absolutely on fire, amazing, the rut's happening, it's on, right? I mean, it can just be that way. And so if you're hunting public or a new spot or an area that you just don't have that rock solid confidence in your zone, sometimes you just have to go and find that hot spot and not be afraid to get on your feet and move around and aggressively push your way around until you find where that hot spot is. And oftentimes you can get away with being a little bit more aggressive, and maybe you do bump a few deer as you go in there, but that's okay. If you find that rut fest where there's the hot doe and there's like 4 satellite bucks all around and stuff, and you bump one of those bucks, it's probably not the end of the world. You could probably slip in there, get set up, and there's going to be action kind of rotate like a hurricane around the eye. Like there's the eye of the hurricane, that's your hot doe. And then there's going to be this spinning vortex of bucks around it for a while. And so if you're struggling and you've been in the dead zone for a while, get up, find that, and that can sometimes get you in the goods that you might not otherwise have if you were just waiting and wishing and don't have a really good reason to be waiting and wishing.
On that, I would say too, I mentioned before, watch those weather changes, but also you still have to hunt the conditions. And so the easiest way to frame this up is with the hot weather, right? Like we're getting a lot of hot weather during the ruts the last few years. It's just happening. And I remember, this is probably 8 years ago now, but driving down to Nebraska to hunt some public land, and it was hot, like 75 degrees. And I hunted my usual stuff and I couldn't see a deer. I mean, it was like just brutal. Or you'd see them, right at last light start poking out. And it was like, I was like, this is so dumb. I can get down in the valley, get into some of this shady cover better, get closer to the trout stream that's down there, and actually be like, at least give myself a chance with these conditions. And I moved down there and I killed a buck almost instantly, like 5 minutes after I got set up. And it's like, yeah, he's going to cruise still, like he's still looking for does, but he's going to go where the deer are going to be, where there's some relief. And so you have to hunt those, you have to hunt to the conditions. You get super windy or dead calm or whatever. It's not just go out and sit your favorite stand and rattle, because they're going to come to you. Like they're still going to react to all these external factors. And so when you're like, well, the rut's not on because I'm not on them, it's like the rut's absolutely on somewhere, like you said, but a lot of times it's tied to them finding some relief, not just from getting away from hunters, but just whatever Mother Nature tosses their way.
Yeah. And so I would just tag on to that by saying that, like you said, there's a lot of people that are looking at the forecast and seeing warm temperatures, and that will scare away some people. And I would just say that, yes, it certainly does seem to slow things down some. But to your point, you can you can use that to your advantage and hunt the places where they should be. And also remember, like, the morning, like, the bucks are still rutting, like the deer are still rutting. The thing is happening. It's not like warm weather stops the rut. It just suppresses the daylight activity, especially the midday or afternoon activity when it's warmest, right? Because they're wearing it's like they're wearing a warm winter jacket. It's just not as comfortable to be out hiking around when you're wearing that and it's 80 degrees. So still, the mornings when they're cool, they're still going to be getting after it. They're still getting after it all night, probably the edges of the evening. So don't mail it in. Don't assume, like, because it's 75 on November 2nd that you shouldn't hunt. You absolutely still can have success and see rutting activity. It just might be a little slower in those warmer parts of the day, but certainly take advantage of the cool mornings, the end of the evening, and don't be surprised if something crazy still does happen, because it is the rut and stuff can surprise you. We got time for one more, Tony, and then we got to wrap it up.
Everybody, I would say my least important piece of deer sign for the rut, not pre-rut, but rut, is a scrape. I move on from them. I like rubs better, but honestly, when I'm in the thick of it and I'm trying to figure out some place to be, or like there's whatever, my plan is changing, tracks are so important to me during the rut. Like fresh, big running tracks or a big concentration of fresh tracks is like that to me, when I see that, is a huge clue. Like if you can tell it's been made within the last day or so, or you can just see that track over track over track, trail, whatever, that's so important, because you want that concentration of deer, or you want that big one that crossed the fence right there. You're like, you didn't have to see him. You can look and see that he left everything you need to know to show you that he at least went through there at some point recently. I like that a lot. Yeah.
And if you're not super comfortable with identifying tracks or reading tracks, you should check out the Whitetail EDU video that Tony and I did. That's over on the MeatEater Clips YouTube channel. You can find that, and we do deep dives into tracks. There's videos on calling, mature buck travel, all sorts of stuff. So if you're needing some last minute brush ups on some tactics, that's another idea for you. It's the Whitetail EDU series.
Plus, there is a video of you eating deer poop, which has made you the most famous deer hunter in the country, apparently.
For some reason, that's the one that everyone sees and comments on. And it was a raisinette, people. Yeah. It was not actually.
Mark cemented his legacy with that video, and that's how he'll be remembered forever.
Yes, that'll be on my tombstone. So my last piece of advice leading into the rut here for all of you is where we started when we began this little period, which is just keep it fun. Like, keep it fun. If you're torn on what to do, or if you're struggling and you're stressed out or whatever, my suggestion is to make the choice that would bring you the most joy. And oftentimes that leads to you being more successful, because it gets your mindset right, gets your attitude right, keeps your energy high. And it's funny, every time that I found myself leaning in that direction, going towards the choices or the trips or the destinations or whatever it is that's actually going to make this thing fun, I ended up actually doing better too. So enjoy this thing. It's the Super Bowl of the whitetail season. It's Christmas and Thanksgiving and Easter and every damn holiday all rolled into one. Enjoy it. Celebrate it. Spend time with your buddies while you're doing it. Go help your friends track a deer, even if it means you're going to miss a little bit of hunting time. Like, that's the stuff that actually leaves a memory forever. Just soak in all the good stuff. That's my greatest suggestion. And I'm going to try to live by that same advice. And I tell you all this because I have been guilty of doing the opposite too often. So that's going to do it for us today. Tony, thank you for making time here before you take off. Good luck in Iowa. Good luck up north. Can't wait to hear how it goes. And for all you listening, this is it. Have a great time. Be safe. Hunt smart. And until next time, stay wired to hunt.